This is a book that, were it cracked, would be worth, tens of thousands of pounds. I'll tell you about one that we came across a few years ago. We were offered by email a first edition of Animal Farm by George Orwell that was purported to be inscribed by George Orwell for a woman with whom he'd had an affair. So a very interesting association in the scope of Orwell's life and biography. So we were very quick to say, we'd love to see it. Can you bring it or send it to us? And the book arrives. And I opened it and immediately said, that's not right. Something was off about the signature and the inscription. This is a book that, were it cracked, would be worth, tens of thousands of pounds without even thinking about it too hard. But then you look closer and the To Eleanor from George had actually been copied very, very closely from a letter that we had sold a few years before that was addressed to Eleanor, and then at the end of the letter signed from George. And it was done in the exact same way as the letter was. So when we put two and two side by side, it was clear that someone had, with, a relatively good hand, copied it. But then if you really look closely and get it well photographed and zoom all the way in, as if you're looking at it under a microscope, you can see that the way the ink gathers on the paper is unnatural. When you're signing your name, usually it's a fluid process, right? If you're signing, a letter from Nick, you just write Nick. Whereas you could see it, the way the ink had gathered on this paper, it had been done really slowly and deliberately. And when you go into that depths, you discover that what was a book you were, willing to write a check for an awful lot of money for, is despoiled and worthless.
Was it actually a first edition? Could you tell if it was actually a first edition?
That was right. Yeah. It was genuinely a first edition, which is a £5,000, £6,000, £7,000 book on its own. So some fraudsters made a costly mistake.
Is that a huge kind of factor in that world?
We are less exposed to fakes and forgeries than other collecting areas. Certainly it's far less common than painting. But we do encounter it. You encounter it mostly, I would say, with forged signatures. If you've got a copy of a book and then you've got a copy of a book signed by an author, that can increase the value. It can add 1 0 to the end of it. It can add a few zeros to the end of it. It can, in some cases, if the author was particularly prolific at signing books, add no value whatsoever. So one encounters forged signatures not infrequently. I wouldn't say most weeks, but certainly every couple of weeks I'll be looking through, say, an auction catalogue, and there'll be a picture of a signed book and immediately say, no, that's wrong. But in terms of forging an entire book, that's a very difficult thing to do. And it has been done. There have been a couple of very famous and high-profile cases in the not too distant past where people have literally forged an entire book by essentially using 3D printing to recreate a form of type and then print on treated paper to make it look like old paper, bind it up and fake an entire printed book from the 16th century. That's an awful lot of work, and you've got to, I suppose, I don't know much about the economy of criminals, but you've got to forge a jolly expensive book for it to reward the time it would take and the risk of being found out. And in that case, it was found out, but not before it had already changed hands for a large sum of money.
Yeah, that would be. It's not like you're going to spend all that time forging books that sell for like £100 or $200 or something like that, right? Like you kind of got to go big, but then if you go big, everybody knows exactly what that thing is supposed to look like.
Because you'd have to replicate
that would explain what
the sort of same printing processes that people were using hundreds of years ago. And that's tough. It's really tough. And you know, if you think about printing itself, that of what we would call the hand press period, which is a period where to print a book, you have to arrange every single piece of type, every single letter is an individual piece. And you have to arrange that in a frame in reverse so that it prints the words the right way round, and then print every single sheet of the book. This whole process would take a year to print an edition of, 500 copies.